All right, this session is being recorded. Yeah, it's a minute after noon. May as well get started here. So so this is Dave Simmons. We're doing another virtual session, and we're fortunate to have Brendan Kevenides take us through some bike law today, and hoping it's going to be a discussion. Brendan has a presentation that he has prepared, but we do hope to have this be a discussion as well. So while everyone's on mute right now, we're going to encourage folks to use the chat, but we'll take folks off mute when there's questions as well. So just a quick note about Ride Illinois. I get that pause. Here we go. So if you guys have been on a session in the past, we've shared our goals. We really want to make biking better for folks all over the state. So whether that's through road construction or suggestions for improving roads, trails, legislation as well, which is pretty relevant to this conversation, cyclist and motorist education, and of course we want to share our love of cycling with others as well. This is our current staff. The three mighty Ride Illinois staff members, myself, Gina, and Ed. And then our corporate members, Freeman Kevenides Law Firm, first and foremost. And Brendan, thank you for taking the time to speak with our group today. We have Civil Tech Engineering, and then Keating Law Office. Because we're going to be talking about bike law, did want to point out the bike safety quiz is based on relevant Illinois traffic laws. So we do suggest if you've not taken bike safety quiz before, do so after this session, or if you haven't taken it in a while, take it again. We do have the 4 different modules, and plug that the Spanish and PDF versions are going to be available soon as well. So Ride Illinois, we are statewide nonprofit bike advocacy organization. So there are certainly ways you can support us. We want you to ride. We want you to ride and follow the rules of the road when you ride. If you know others who might be interested in what our organization does, please share information about Ride Illinois with them. Again, take the quiz. Email us, send us comments on Facebook. We want to hear from our members and supporters. So if you guys have suggestions and concerns, please do share those. And then we do have a presence on social media, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. And I know a lot of folks on the call today are members. If you're not a member, we'd certainly appreciate it if you'd consider joining us and supporting our advocacy work. My contact information, our general email is info@rideillinois.org, so you can reach us there as well. Again, for those that may have just joined, we're having some slight issues with our website at the moment. We hope that it'll be back up and running smoothly in the next couple days. So apologies for any issues that has caused. So just some ground rules. We're going to ask folks to stay on mute unless you're speaking. I love the fact that I am like all powerful and I can mute people like with the click of a button. Certainly while Brendan's going through some of his information, we'll ask you to stay on mute. If you have something that you want to share, you can use the chat, or I saw at least one person raise their hand. So I'm going to keep an eye on that while Brendan shares the meat of the presentation. I want to give everyone an opportunity to chime in. Again, the chat's there for comments and questions. I have a few polls that we put together. They're just kind of general information to keep you engaged and also to get some input from you. And then, we're all going through some pretty crazy times right now. So hopefully this session gives you an hour-long break from what is the current situation. After this, we'll share a link with the recording. It will eventually get posted on our website, so you can share that with others as well. And with that, I would like to turn things over to Brendan. So let me stop sharing here, and Brendan, you should be able to stop. So,
all right.
Brendan Kevenides, welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave. Before I start, let me make sure I get this thing doing what it's supposed to do. How's that, Dave? Can you see that?
I can't yet.
Well, let's see.
I don't know if anyone else has seen it. That looks good.
And how's that?
Yep, I can see it now.
Boom. Okay, great. So thanks a lot, Dave. I really appreciate you and Ride Illinois putting this program together and inviting me to participate. I'm also really excited to have all of you listening in. I hope all of you are staying safe and healthy and are finding the time to ride solo, right? Not in groups. Personally, I found that riding over the last several weeks by myself has helped keep me sane, keep me focused. So hopefully everyone else is having a similar experience. So what I want to do today is talk about bicycle crashes, and I want to talk about how to avoid them, what the most common types are that I see in my law practice, and I guess I should talk a little bit about who I am and what I do. I am a partner in Freeman Kevenides law firm. We are located in downtown Chicago, and we also have an office out in Fairfield, Iowa. My partner, Jim Freeman, mans that office out there. And we have, in addition to Jim and I, we have 2 attorneys, 2 paralegals, and all we do all day, every day is bicycle crash cases. That's it. We don't do car-on-car crashes. We don't do slip and falls. We don't do medical malpractice. Our focus is entirely on bicycle crashes. And that's it. Once in a while, we'll do a pedestrian case. Once in a while, we'll get, a scooter case or skateboard case, but our focus really is on vulnerable road users. So one of the things that I want to focus on is the types of cases we see most frequently, how to avoid them, and then what to do if avoidance is not possible. And primarily what we are talking about is 2 kinds of cases, right? Bicycles versus motor vehicles and bicycles versus road hazards. Those are really the 2 kinds of cases that we handle day in and day out. Once in a while, we'll get an odd one where a dog attacks a guy on a bike or something like that. But for the most part, it's cars versus bikes, bikes versus road hazards. So,
Hey, Brendan, can I just quickly ask a question here? So I think this is a good time to maybe ask this first poll question here. So I'm going to launch this poll. If you guys can just respond, since Brendan is talking about crashes. So just thought we'd ask if folks have been involved in a crash while cycling. And then the secondary question is, were the police called and was a report filed? So just curious. We'll give folks just a second to answer that. And I'll share the results. This is completely anonymous. Brendan will not be calling you after this because you were in a crash. You report it.
No, I will not be calling you.
All right, looks like we're almost there yet. 19 or 22. All right, I think that's good. Nope, there's 20. All right, I'm gonna end it there and just share the results here. So wow, split 50-50 as far as crashes. And so yeah, just most people.
That's interesting. You got 50% of the people participating have been in a crash, but only 15% of the police were called. Kind of interesting.
Well, I think it's like 40% of those that were, right? So I think we're looking at 10 people that were, and four of those police were called.
Yeah.
So
okay.
Anyway, all right. Sorry for. But thought it was good.
No problem at all. No problem at all. So, I mean, one of the things I was going to ask, and maybe we can even do this in the chat session, although I'm unsure how I can I see the chat session? I was going to ask, what are the most common types of motor vehicle versus bike crashes in heavily populated areas? In other words, inside a city or in a town near where you live. I just want to see what everyone thinks. What are the most common types of crashes? In other words, the circumstances. And if you can type that into the chat section,
we got to
get a sense of that. Not sure I'm seeing the chat session
All
though.
right, well, so we've got intersections, right hook, not paying attention at intersections, biking too close to parked cars, distracted drivers, dooring, right hook,
Right.
crossings, car making a turn with no signals on.
Right. It sounds like everyone gets it. I mean, definitely, these are the most common types of crashes that we see in our practice. And our practice is, it does have a heavy Chicago focus, but we've handled cases throughout Illinois and, as I mentioned earlier, in Iowa as well. And intersection crashes and doorings, especially in urban areas, are definitely by far the most common types of crashes that we see. So these are going to be the areas that, as you're riding your bike, you want to be the most careful, but recognizing that even when you're being careful, these things cannot be avoided much of the time. When we're talking about intersection crashes specifically, we're looking at primarily two types, right? A left cross and a right hook. Our experience is more common. The left cross is significantly more common than the right hook. The left cross is a situation where you have motor vehicle and bicycle going through generally a controlled intersection, bicyclist going straight, car wanting to turn left, driver doesn't see bicyclist, turns into them and hits them. Very common. The right hook is where you have bicyclists and driver going through an intersection, but this time in the same directions. The driver doesn't see the bicyclist, turns into them or right in front of them. Less common, but still pretty prevalent. All right, so those are definitely the two most common types of intersection crashes. The next most common type of crash altogether is doorings. And this is probably number one in town, in urban areas. It's a situation that's so easy to avoid on the part of the driver. All you have to do is look. And I'm aware that through the efforts of Ride Illinois and Ed Barsati, that part of the Illinois driver's test now includes, or you can correct me if I'm wrong on this, Dave, either now includes or will soon include instruction to drivers about how to avoid this sort of situation. Am I right that that's now part of the test, Dave?
With the Dutch reach and whatnot.
With the Dutch reach, exactly.
Yeah.
And the Dutch reach, for those of you that don't know, the idea is once you parked your car curbside, you should use your right hand rather than your left hand to open the door, because it encourages sort of a looking and a reaching to encourage people to look for bikes. So these are the two most common types of crashes. What are some of the keys to avoiding bike versus motor vehicle collisions? There are four that I've sort of identified that I think that probably cover just about everything. But I'd like to hear again right now, use the chat section and offer me what your ideas are, your thoughts about how bicycle versus motor vehicle collisions can be avoided, steps you can take on your bike to help avoid them. I'm not talking about policy type stuff, but just safety measures while you're riding. Go ahead and do that in the chat section.
Yeah, and feel free to, if you want to raise your hand too, I can unmute folks too if you've got something that maybe is a little wordier. We've got making eye contact with the driver before crossing, following the rules of the road from Scott, being visible, taking the lane, that came from Rich. Forget about phones.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, let's see, Kim's got her hand up. I'm gonna, I think, unmute her.
She seems to be muted still.
Maybe, oh, sorry guys, we're, let's see. I don't know if you're self-muted, Kim, but.
Okay, there we go.
Yeah,
There we
you
go.
No, I was going to say yield to the car. Let them have their way.
Yeah. For sure. I mean, if you're in a situation where you're both sort of there and it's not clear who needs to yield, yeah, the wise course is to back off and let the car go, because you're always going to lose that battle, right? So yeah, good thought. The four things that I tend to think of when I think about how do we avoid these crashes from happening to begin with, I think first and foremost, be visible, right? I mean, other than the occasional nut job behind the wheel of a car, I mean, 99.9% of drivers actually do not want to hit you. And generally, that happens when they don't see you. Now, that's often not the bicyclist's fault. It is often the fault of the driver who's not paying attention. But as riders, we do what we can to be visible. And a lot of that has to do with what you're wearing. It has to do with using lights at night, which is required by law, right? White front headlight and either a red rear reflector or red rear light. And also lane positioning, riding not in the gutter, not riding while you're hugging the curb, but riding a little bit more out into the lane of traffic makes you more visible. So general rule, if a driver can see you, they're not going to hit you. The next thing is be assertive. And what I mean by this is know your rights and exercise them. Getting back to lane positioning, there's a natural tendency, right, to want to hug the curb along the right side of the roadway. I think we all know we generally ride along the right side of the roadway. And there's a natural tendency that's understandable to hug that curb because you want to stay out of the way of motor vehicles moving. We're not required to do so under the law or roadway, but as far to the right as is safe and practicable. And safe and practicable, those of us that are, league certified instructors in the League of American Bicyclists understand that safe means a little bit out into the lane. So you're not riding where all the broken glass is, and you are easily seen not by drivers coming up from behind, but also cars that may be emerging from a driveway or an intersection. So be assertive, understand your rights and exercise them. Now, as we were just discussing, when somebody asked a question, you're not going to win a battle where you have a driver that just refuses to yield. So back off. That's not what I mean by be assertive. But generally speaking, you should understand your rights and exercise them. Don't cower to the side of the road. That really is not helpful. The other thing you want to be, and this I guess goes without saying, is be alert. It's nice to ride and let your mind wander a little bit, especially when you're on a country road and take in the sights and the sounds. But especially when you're riding in traffic, being alert to the possibility of doors opening, drivers not doing what they're supposed to do. It goes without saying that you need to pay attention. And then equally important is be predictable, right? Do those things that drivers would reasonably expect you to do. Now, in this slide, we put a picture of a fish on a bike, a salmon on a bike. What I'm getting at there is don't be like a salmon, right? Don't try to swim against the flow of traffic. You should always be riding with traffic. You should not be riding the wrong way down a one-way. You want to be predictable. A driver is not going to expect you to be riding the wrong way down a one-way. Stop signs. You are required to stop at all stop signs in Illinois. You are also required to stop at all traffic lights in Illinois. There are some caveats to that outside of the city of Chicago. For example, when a red light's not working, the so-called dead red situation. But the general rule is bicyclists are required to stop at stop signs and red lights. Now we can discuss in a different forum whether that's what the law should be. I disagree that the law should be that, but nevertheless, for the time being, that's what the law is. So with that, the important part of that is drivers are going to expect you and everyone else to stop at stop signs and red lights. And for that reason, you should do so, all right? So if you do these 4 things, your chances of being hit by a driver, being hit by a motor vehicle are reduced, all right? Road hazards. What I mean by road hazards is things like holes in bike lanes, potholes for the most part. I put up some pictures here from actual cases. All 3 of these photographs are from cases that my firm has handled. The one on the left where you see the bike in a drainage area, that occurred on Lawrence Avenue here in Chicago a couple of years ago. All of the sewer drainage grates that have these long slats into which a bike tire could fit were supposed to have been removed and replaced years ago by the city of Chicago, but surprise, surprise, there's still a few lurking out there. We see in that bottom picture a hole, what appears to be a sinkhole inside a bike lane in the city of Chicago. I had a client hit that and suffer some serious facial injuries. And then we see another on the right side, I believe that's from South Shore Drive from a few years ago, where I had a guy out on a club ride go through what he thought was just a puddle of water. And lo and behold, when he went through it, he found that there was a pretty deep hole there. So he was injured. So that's primarily what we're talking about. So if you find yourself crashing because of something like this in the roadway, what responsibility does the city, the town have to compensate you? Well, as a general rule, cities, municipalities around our state have a responsibility, just like a private landowner, to maintain their property in a reasonably safe condition. So if you are a town that has a bike lane, you should keep that bike lane in a reasonably safe condition. If you know or should know that there's a huge sinkhole in the middle of your bike lane, you should fix it. Simple, right? That notice requirement can get tricky. I don't want to get too deep in the weeds on that. Proving that a town had notice of a hole or other hazard in a roadway can be tricky, but as a general rule, once a city, municipality knows or should know that there's a hazard in a place where people ride their bikes, they should fix it, right? But there are some other potential ways that a municipality can avoid liability. One of the most notorious in the state of Illinois, and this is special to us. I'm not aware of any other of the 49 states in the United States that has this rule that was created by our Supreme Court in the infamous case of Boub versus Township of Wayne, where I think this was in the late 90s. A guy out in Wayne Township was riding his bicycle on a bike bridge. There was a problem with the bridge. It had some sort of hazard. He crashed and was seriously hurt. There was a lawsuit brought against the Township of Wayne by Mr. Boub saying that, well, look, I mean, the town knew that people rode their bikes over this bridge. The bridge was in bad shape. They should have fixed it. Is not marked specifically for bike. Intent on the part of Wayne Township to invite bicyclists to use this area. People could use the area, they were permitted to do so, but they were not invited to. Therefore, there's no liability. In Boub versus Wayne Township, the Illinois Supreme Court found on behalf of the defense and created a general rule in our state that if there's a hazard in a roadway and a bicyclist becomes injured as a result, the municipality responsible for maintaining that area will not be held liable, cannot be held liable unless the area was marked explicitly marked with signs or lines painted on the ground for bike traffic. That indicates that there was an intent that bicyclists use the area. Without that, bicyclists are permitted to use the area, but that's not good enough to create liability. I know that all sounds very confusing and convoluted and like a lot of lawyer mumbo jumbo, but the practical impact is if you're riding outside of an area marked for bike traffic, like a bike lane, if you're riding outside one of those areas and you hit a hole, say, or another hazard and you're injured, it's going to be impossible to have that municipality held liable, all right? The other potential barrier is if you're riding in a recreational area. In other words, you are riding in a park, in a playground, in some sort of recreational facility. And again, let's say you're riding through a park and you hit a big hole on one of the paths that go through the park. You are not going to be able to hold the municipality that is responsible for maintaining and running that park unless you can show that the hazard got there by something almost approaching intent on the part of the municipality to create a hazard for bicyclists. The likelihood you're going to prove that is small. So why do these rules exist? Well, our legislature and our Supreme Court want to encourage the creation of recreational areas as well as areas meant where people can ride their bikes safely, and they worry that if there's litigation, somebody gets hurt in one of these areas, it reduces a municipality's ability to provide these areas to ride bikes. I strongly disagree with these sorts of positions because we don't want just areas to ride our bikes. We want places to ride our bikes safely. And if that's not happening, if we're provided with paths and trails that are not safe and someone gets hurt, well, as I see it, municipalities should be held responsible. But my position in that regard does not rule the day. So I want you to be aware of these things and know that they exist and as you're out there riding your bike. I am going to, sometimes there's debate between city and local municipality as to who should be responsible, but we're going to skip that part for now, all right? And instead, I want to talk about what to do once a crash has happened. You've done everything right. You've been visible, you've been assertive, you have been predictable, you've done all the things you're supposed to do, but nevertheless, a crash happens. Imagine, for example, you're riding through the street, weather's beautiful, you're taking in the sights, you're in town when suddenly a door flies open in front of you, you're thrown from your bike, you land in the street, you immediately know that your collarbone's broken. What do? Well, I have put together what I like to call the 5 C's, things to remember when you go through something like that. Calm down, call 911, use your camera on your phone, communicate with the people around you, and get medical care. These are the 5 things you should do if you are ever involved in a crash. All right, let's talk about them in more detail. The first thing you need to do, right, is calm down, remove yourself from further danger. You should recognize after a crash that you are now not at your best to make solid decisions, right? Your adrenaline's flowing, you're in pain, you're maybe embarrassed, you may be angry at the driver, maybe you're angry at yourself, I don't know, but recognize that in that moment, you are not in a terrific position to make decisions, which is one of the reasons it's so important to remember these things and just do them rotely after a crash, okay? And first and foremost, if you can, remove yourself from further danger. If you can get out of the roadway, do so, right? If you can get on the sidewalk, if you can move over to a grassy area, do so. Make sure that the situation doesn't get worse, all right? The next thing you want to do is you want to call 911. Don't think about it. Don't think about it. Call 911. Oh, it creates a huge hassle. The sirens are going to be on, an ambulance is going to come, the sirens are going to be on, people are going to gather, and there you are right in the center of the storm, right? Let's be frank, that's not particularly enjoyable. Nevertheless, it's something that you should do. You need to get a police report. The police, depending on where you are, I'll talk about the Chicago Police Department because that's what I deal with most of the time. They are often not going to be particularly helpful. They will discourage you much of the time from having a police report done. Nevertheless, you want to politely insist that you get a police report. Why is that so important? Because understand, police reports are not evidence. In fact, in Illinois, police reports are expressly barred from being admitted into evidence if there's a trial down the road. However, the police report, when you're dealing down the road with the driver's insurance company, if a police report doesn't exist, it calls into question the credibility of the thing that happened actually having happened. In other words, it provides some proof that when you say, hey, I was involved in a crash with this driver in this place, the fact that the police were there to document that that happened lends credibility to that. So you really need to get a police report. I should say that if you don't get a police report at the scene, let's say you call 911 and no one comes, you end up going to the hospital or going home afterwards. The next day or the day after that, or whenever you feel that you can do it physically, you should go to the police station nearest where the crash happened and get that police report. All right, super important. After that, you really want to pull out your cell phone. Hopefully you have one with you. It's good to ride with a cell phone. And use the camera phone if you're physically able to snap some photographs. In particular of the vehicle involved and their license plate. Sadly, I can't tell you how many times I've had people involved in crashes, the driver stuck around for a minute, then took off. And it can be very difficult to find those folks. If someone was riding with like a GoPro camera, or this happened in an area where there's a red light camera, we might be able to get a license plate, but often it's very difficult. And even if there's a private security camera in the area that catches the crash, usually that video is not good enough to make out a license plate. So if you can, take out your camera phone, snap a quick pic of that license plate just in case the driver takes off. And I'm sorry to report, it does happen quite often. Next thing you want to do is you want to communicate with the people around you if you're able to. I have found that other bicyclists that may be in the area, people just walking by, other motorists, are often quite helpful. People do tend to stop when they see somebody get hurt or see somebody that's been in a crash, and they want to help, and they'll say, you know, give me your phone, I'll put my contact information in your phone, or here's my business card, call me if you need help. You do want to encourage that, because you want to avoid a situation where you have the, you know, he said, she said, whatever. If the driver is going to deny the truth about what happened, you need a good witness to help break that tie. So to the extent there's a witness that's available, that's there, that's willing to give you their contact information, that could prove very helpful down the road. And then finally, and perhaps actually the most important thing, last but certainly not least, is get medical care. If there is any question whatsoever about your being hurt, go to the hospital, ideally in an ambulance, okay? A few years ago, and this really resonated with me, there was a guy that got hurt in the Logan Square neighborhood of Chicago where I live. And there's a lot of people that ride bikes in this neighborhood. And he was hit by a van on Logan Boulevard. Didn't think he was seriously hurt, but he felt kind of sleepy afterwards, figuring, well, he's drained, you know, that adrenaline rush, and then it comes down, can leave you feeling exhausted. He didn't have any broken bones. He wasn't bleeding profusely. He figured, I'm just going to go home and take a nap. Well, unbeknownst to him, he hit his head in the crash, and he did have a brain bleed that was slow. And as he was at home sleeping, it increased the pressure inside his head, and he ended up dying, never really knowing that he was seriously injured. So going back to where we started this part of the discussion, that you're not in a good place to make decisions after a crash, go get care afterwards. I know that the cost is an issue for many people, even people with health insurance. You worry about deductibles, you worry about co-pays, but nevertheless, it is super important to make sure that you're not more badly hurt than you think you are. Go get care. Super important, all right? The other thing is, important thing, your health and safety. One of the things we're going to need to try to prove is that you were hurt as a result of this particular crash. And also we're going to have to demonstrate the severity of your injury, whatever that may be. If there is a delay between the crash and the care that you received, it can raise red flags about, one, whether your injury was caused by the crash. Maybe you went home and fell down the stairs, an insurance company might claim. And or it calls into question how badly hurt you are. Well, how badly hurt could they have been if they didn't go to the hospital right away, right? So aside from your health and safety, to protect your rights down the road, for that additional reason, it's important that you get care as quickly as possible, all right? Dave, any questions or thoughts at this point before we move on?
I posed the question in the chat here, if there were any questions or anything that would like Brendan to go into a little more in depth.
Because next we're going to talk about the next natural question, do I need a lawyer, right? How do you guys know you've been in a crash, you've gotten medical care, now what do? You're at home, you're convalescing, do you need a lawyer, right? Well, I suppose the answer to that depends. What's at stake, right? Can you afford to lose the impending battle with the driver, if there is to be a battle, or their insurance company? Does the driver have insurance? Do they have any assets at all? Well, you need to consider those sorts of things, and how severe your injury is, what your medical bills may be, and whether there's property damage. So I'm constantly modifying this list, and I've in the past had more items on it. These 5 bullet points are what I'm using now in terms of what should be considered when you're determining, should I go it alone? Should I try to deal with this on my own, or should I hire a lawyer? And I think what you have to think about is, how severe is your injury? Do you understand your rights, even if you're not a lawyer? I mean, I've run into plenty of bicyclists, certainly people that advocate for bicyclist rights, understand their rights and responsibilities. Others may be less familiar. So how familiar are you with your rights when it comes to biking? Do you have time to deal with it, to collect evidence, to talk to insurance companies, to talk to doctors' offices? Are you comfortable dealing with lien holders? Do you know what that means?
Mhm.
And we're going to discuss that in a minute, but that's a big part of dealing with this sort of litigation. If you find yourself asking, I don't know what a lien is or a lien holder, and if all of these other things apply, it might be a good idea to get yourself a lawyer. And then what happens if you can't settle the claim by talking to the driver and their insurance company? What do you do then? Do you have the ability to file a lawsuit and take it all the way through trial on your own? I'm guessing if you're not a lawyer, that's going to be pretty tough. So going,
Brendan,
yeah,
let me ask what a question came in. So before you go too much further, Tom had
sure.
asked Tim, if you should take a picture of the driver involved in the crash.
Yeah, ideally that would be helpful. That's a good question. I have seen situations where I've suspected that drivers pull a switcheroo for some reason. Say, for example, they have a passenger in the car, the driver's had a couple of drinks, maybe the passenger hasn't, and after the crash, they switch seats. I have, believe it or not, seen that happen. So yeah, snapping a picture of the driver can be very helpful. That's an excellent question. Anything else, Dave?
Just compliments.
Cool. So the severity of your injury. Look, if your injury is severe, certainly if you're admitted to the hospital for any significant period of time, or even if you're at home convalescing, it's gonna be tough to do the things you need to do right away. You need to contact the driver's insurance company right away. And if you're not represented by an attorney, you really don't want to be talking to the insurance company, all right? And we're going to get to this a little bit later in the presentation, but they're not going to be fair with you. They have a knowledge base that's greater than yours because they do this all the time. And I promise you, they will have a lawyer or lawyers on their behalf. Are you going to be able to talk and contact witnesses? Are you going to be able to get out there and try to collect video from either private security cameras or from the city if they have red light cameras or other surveillance cameras? That evidence goes missing very quickly after a crash. And if you're busy convalescing, you're going to have a hard time doing that. So again, if your injury is significant, you really are better off having an attorney help you at the outset. Do you understand your rights? I mean, we talked about this a little bit. I mean, I think Dave understands his rights. I think Ed Barsati understands his rights. But the average bicyclist may not understand that, hey, if someone throws their door open in front of you, they are going to be liable if you hit it. So many times I've heard of drivers and insurance companies blame bicyclists for enduring cases when they're making that assertion is just utterly ridiculous to anyone who understands the law. So you must be confident and understand your rights, all right? A lawyer is going to be confident, is going to know the bicyclist's rights and be confident in that knowledge, and that's really important. Along those same lines, and this is the story I like to tell about this. Several years ago, I represented a young woman who was riding her bike on Milwaukee Avenue in Chicago. And she passed through the intersection of Milwaukee and Fullerton in Logan Square. And there is a 7-Eleven store on the northeast corner of that intersection. There's also a bike lane there. She was riding in the bike lane, and there was a delivery truck there along the curb. As she was about to pass the delivery truck, the truck driver swung his door open into her path. She hit that door full force because she had no warning. She hit it with her face, and she actually bent the truck door. She was seriously hurt herself, but she also bent the truck door. And let me tell you, she was a slightly built person. She was not a big person, and this was a sizable truck. So, she came to me, I represented her. A few months after I signed her up, she sent this letter to me that she had received in the mail. And what it is, it may not be apparent just by looking at it, but it's a bill for the damage her face did to the door. And it was just sent to her as a matter of course by, I guess, the company that managed this fleet of trucks, saying, hey, you damaged our door with your face. We demand payment. And, here it is. This letter is to advise you of our subrogation claim on behalf of our client for the above listed claim in which you are liable. That's scary, right? I mean, you get that. It looks official. It's from this company, Fleet Response in Cleveland, Ohio. My goodness, it must be legit, right? Well, I'm here to tell you, I mean, this was nothing short of just a Jedi mind trick, right? I mean, you are responsible for the door. No, you're not. That's ridiculous. But unless you are confident in your rights, you're not going to appreciate that. One of the reasons why it can be important when there's a lot at stake to have a lawyer involved. Do you have the time and ability to collect the evidence? And what I want to focus on here is just how important actual evidence is. And this is sometimes I find I need to emphasize even with lawyers. There's sometimes a natural inclination to believe that, well, I was riding a bike, I got hit by a car, or this person opened their door in front of me, and I got hurt. What else do you need to know? Well, understand that the driver and the insurance company they're gonna deny everything, or at least you should assume that they will, right? So you need to talk to witnesses, right? You need to make sure you get all their contact information. Find out where the witness is gonna be in a year or 2 years if they know, because you're gonna need them down the road. You need to gather video, if it exists, that shows how the crash happened, right? You may need to make a FOIA request to get some of that video to the city or municipality where the crash occurred. You will need to not just go to the doctor, go to the hospital, although that's of the utmost importance, as I mentioned, but you're going to need to collect all of your medical records after you're done treating. That sounds simple, but I can tell you it can be a real pain in the butt dealing with multiple providers. Sometimes you have a hospital and those bills are going to come from different entities, not just the hospital. So it can be quite a bit of work. It's not rocket science, but I can tell you that I have one person in my office, Ann Alt, some of you know her, who all she does all day, every day is that. She collects medical records and bills, and it is the heart and soul of our firm, and it is vitally important, and it's a lot of work. So doing that on your own can be quite daunting. Dealing with lien holders at the end of the case, I don't want to go too deeply into this, but it is vitally important, and it can be really difficult to deal with if you don't know what you're doing. The long and the short of it is, a lien is a right someone else has to your property, right? So if you take out a mortgage to buy your home, the bank, whoever provides you with that loan, is going to have a lien on your house. If you don't pay your mortgage, they may have the right to take it from you. You do own the house, but they have a legal right to your property if you don't make that loan payment. That's also going to be the case with regard to a medical provider. If you don't have insurance, or maybe they don't want to accept your insurance, they may provide you with that care, but lien your case, meaning that when your case settles or you get a jury verdict, you are going to have to pay them out of that settlement or jury verdict. The other kind is a right of subrogation your health insurer has, meaning that after they pay your benefits, if you get a settlement or jury verdict, you're going to have to reimburse them, okay? Those things have to be dealt with, and they can be negotiated. Again, not rocket science. If you know what you're doing, a law office will deal with these things for you. So again, if there's a lot at stake, you want a lawyer involved to help you with that. Any questions about any of this so far? Okay. Let me know if you do. Just stop us, post anything if you have questions. The other thing, the last thing I want to say about health insurance, if you have it, is this. Always, always have your health insurance provider pay your medical bills initially after a crash. Your lawyer should get you compensated for the full amount of the bills, not just for insurance co-payments or deductibles, but the full amount, even if insurance pays. As I mentioned, you will have to reimburse your health insurer, but your health insurer doesn't pay the sticker price of those bills. They pay a much lower negotiated rate. If you don't have your health insurer pay your bills, you are going to have to pay the full amount of those bills once the case settles. If your health insurer has paid them, you will only have to reimburse them for the benefits they paid, which will be much less. Having your health insurer pay those bills at the outset will increase the amount of money you get to keep from any settlement or jury verdict. Super important, okay? All right. These are just some examples of liens. As I mentioned, a good attorney is going to help you maximize your recovery and negotiate those liens. Finally, in the context of should I have a lawyer, what do you do if the case cannot be settled outside of litigation? What are you going to do then? Well, what you're going to have to do is file a lawsuit. And do you have the ability to do that? Again, if the case is small, let's say, for example, and this happens all the time, where there's only damage to your bike, right? Let's say there's a crash. Thankfully, you're not hurt, but your bike is damaged. You know, your front wheel is bent. You need a new wheel. And that's going to cost you, I don't know, depends on your wheel set, but let's say that's going to cost you $500, right? Probably doesn't make a whole heck of a lot of sense to hire a lawyer, although I take those calls and I'll walk you through how to deal with something like that, perhaps in the small claims court or deal with the driver's insurance company. But if you have more significant property damage, and especially if there's bodily injury, you're going to want to file a lawsuit in the main court, and you're going to need a lawyer for that. After the lawsuit's filed, there's going to be depositions that need to be taken. Ultimately, there could be a trial. So consider that. What do you do if a case cannot be settled outside of litigation? All right. The next thing I want to talk about here, now, am I okay on time, Dave?
Yeah, and I was just putting in the chat that if folks have questions, they can put them in the chat or raise their hands, and
Okay.
then we can answer those. So.
Cool. I'm almost done with this. I do want to make sure we have time for questions, but I do want to talk here about the uninsured situation. What if the driver doesn't have car insurance? 1 in 7 people nationwide, 1 in 7 drivers nationwide do not have automobile insurance coverage. 1 in 7. That, despite the fact that I believe 49 out of 50 states require automobile insurance if you're going to drive. I don't know. I think New Hampshire's an outlier. Maybe that's slanderous if there's any New Hampshire people here, but for the most part, you're required to have insurance, but 1 in 7 do not. Anecdotally, I've not seen data, but I would say in the city of Chicago, it's probably more like 1 in 3. The point is there are a lot of drivers out there without insurance coverage. And for the most part, people don't have money. Everyone's leveraged with mortgages and loans and credit card debt. So the idea of going after someone's personal assets is not an awesome option. It's generally not viable. However, you can protect yourself from that sort of situation by having underinsured or uninsured motorist coverage as a part of your own motor vehicle coverage, right? If you drive you want to make sure, of course, that you have car insurance. And if you have car insurance, you want to make sure that included within that coverage is uninsured coverage, protecting you in the event you are hit by a driver without insurance. Then you can look to your own insurer to compensate you. They cannot raise your rates for doing so. And the underinsured coverage protects you if you're hit by a driver that does have coverage, but it's insufficient to fully compensate you. The minimum amount of insurance coverage that you have to have in Illinois is $25,000 to cover bodily injury for a single person. That's not much, especially if you end up with a fracture, if you end up needing surgery, God forbid, if you're admitted to the hospital, you can incur $100,000 in medical bills quite easily. $25,000 in coverage is not going to cut it. If your underinsured coverage is higher than the driver's coverage, it can kick in to help provide you with additional compensation. If you do not have a car, and many of my clients do not, many of them rely on their bicycles solely to get around, you can get what's called non-car owners auto coverage that will include underinsured and underinsured coverage, and generally that's sold at a cheaper rate, and this can help protect you, right? So there's a lot more that can be discussed on any of these topics, but I want to make sure we leave time for questions. That's what I have to say, and now we'll open it to questions.
Yeah, great information, Brendan. And I've seen you guys do presentations before, and every time I walk away with some new info. Chris has a question about biking on a sidewalk in Chicago.
Great, go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, well, he put it in the chat, so I'm sorry. She has.
I am not. I don't know why I'm not seeing the chat.
Well, if a parent is accompanying their child, is it okay for the parent to ride on the sidewalk?
As a general rule, the answer to that is no. If the child, you have to be under the age of 12 to ride on the sidewalk in the city of Chicago. Let me put it this way. The rule throughout the state of Illinois, the general rule is that sidewalk riding is allowed, period, for anyone. However, as many of you probably know, many municipalities, the city of Chicago included, have ordinances in place that prohibit sidewalk riding for people over the age of 12. There is no exception in those ordinances. We can certainly argue that there should be, but there isn't that I'm aware of that allows a parent to ride on the sidewalk next to them. Now, what I've done when my daughter was younger is I would ride in the street next to them. Quite frankly, if you feel like the safest option is to ride with them on the sidewalk, do it anyway, right? Because the most important thing is making sure you and your child are safe. But if a police officer sees you, if there's other people on the sidewalk that could, pedestrians, that could be in danger by, people riding on the sidewalk, a police officer might say something. But as a general rule, under most ordinances that prohibit sidewalk riding, there's no exceptions for parents riding next to their children.
All right, cool. We got a couple more questions here. Are there any special laws for riding on the lakefront path? If so, where could they find the laws?
Yeah, there really aren't any specific rules that have been put into place other than the current lockdown. Many of you may be aware of. The lakefront trail for the moment is closed because of COVID-19, but there are not any special rules for riding along the lakefront path. We can argue that, again, maybe there should be, but there are not. The rules are basically the same as they would be if you were riding out on the road. I'm trying to think of a special circumstance.
That's Chicago Park District, right?
Well, that is the other thing, Dave. Yeah, this is going to be considered a recreational area. But I guess if you're looking to sue the city of Chicago because there was a hazard and that has come up, it's going to be very, very difficult. If you're looking at making a claim against another lakefront path user, for example, a pedestrian that's come out into your path, or another bicyclist, that's easier. I mean, they have the same responsibility to act reasonably as a driver does. I have had cases, I mentioned dogs earlier in this. I have had situations, dog owners who allow their dogs to run out into the lakefront path have caused crashes involving bicyclists, and we have successfully pursued those cases against the dog owners. So there's always a responsibility of all path users to act reasonably and responsibly. But yeah, Dave, if the issue is the path itself is hazardous, that's going to be real tough because of that recreational immunity.
Yeah. All right, we've got two more questions, and then I think we can maybe just share any other questions that folks have can send via email. One question: will my medical expenses, or I'm sorry, will my, I guess medical insurance, I'm assuming, will my med pay on my car insurance, cover my medical expenses?
Excellent question. The answer to that,
yeah, go ahead.
That's all right. As generally speaking, the answer to that is yes.
Okay.
Yeah, that is one of the places you can look for coverage, especially in the short term. That is also, you're involved in a crash, you're going to bring a claim against the driver. Let's assume the driver has insurance. In the meantime, you can look to your own health insurance. You can look also to the med pay provision of your own car insurance to help provide coverage. That is helpful to help cover deductibles or co-pays that may be in place with regard to your own health insurance. And it can also be helpful if you don't have health insurance at all. Now, that situation can be tougher because generally the med pays as part of an auto coverage are fairly low, usually $5,000 or $10,000. So that may not be enough to cover all of your medical bills. But yes, as a general rule, that can be used to cover some of the costs that you incur. Good question.
All right, and then are there any laws in the city of Chicago about bike lanes being obstructed because of construction, either temporarily occupied or closed for an extended time?
Yeah, the rule is that if a entity like the gas company or even a private construction company are going to occupy or take over a part of a bike lane, that they're supposed to make accommodations for bikes. They are also supposed to put that bike lane right back into the same condition as it was. As I think we all know, those of us that ride often in the city of Chicago, those things are often not done. Confidentiality clauses in places in cases I frequently work in the bike lanes that don't always do what they're supposed to do in terms of making those areas safe while they're working and putting those areas back into shape when they're done working. We have successfully pursued those cases against against those utilities and private contractors. So yeah, they're supposed to do the right thing, and where injury results, call us or call another firm who knows what they're doing. All right.
Yeah,
there's quite a few of those actually.
I've got one more question that Marcia snuck in here. So if there is a bike lane, is she required to use it, or can she still ride in the car lane?
Yeah, excellent question. The answer to that is, if there is a bike lane, you are not required, in Illinois anyway, you're not required to use it. And that really is important because there are plenty of perfectly legitimate reasons not to ride in the bike lane, right? I mean, first of all, depending on what kind of riding you're doing, you may not want to. For example, if you're out doing intervals on your road bike trying to get a good workout in, I'm not sure riding in the bike lane with, people that may be going slower, people that may be riding with children. I'm not sure that that's necessarily the way to go, depending on how crowded it is. Also, you need to exit the bike lane to execute a left turn, for example. You may need to exit the bike lane in order to avoid a hazard, in order to go around a vehicle, perhaps a motor vehicle that's blocking the bike lane. You may need to exit the bike lane to pass a slower moving bicyclist. All of these things are permitted under the law. And are things you may well need to do. And when doing any of them, you are permitted to ride outside the bike lane without consequence, without legal consequence. So yeah, good question.
All right, I think that's all the questions that we have. Thanks to everyone who was able to chime in. If there are any other questions that come in, I'll shoot them over to Brendan, and maybe he can provide a quick answer. And then when we email out the link to the presentation.
I'm going to put, Dave, just real quick, I was going to put up that first page that has my contact information,
There you go.
my phone number, and you can go to the website. You can email me. My email address is on the website at fkloyillinois.com. There's my phone number. If you want to chat, don't ever be hesitant to give me a call. If you, God forbid, you're in a crash and you're not quite sure what you should do, give me a call. Even if I don't represent you, I'm happy to chat.
Awesome. Thank you, Brendan. I appreciate your time and lots of great information. A couple other questions came in. I'll shoot them over to you if I can't answer them for sure.
Terrific.
Yes. So with that, we just want everyone to be safe. Sneak out for a solo ride from time to time. Keep your physical and mental health up during this COVID-19 outbreak. So look for a link to the recording. It usually comes the next day or so. Appreciate everyone's time. And we got a couple more webinars. Ed's going to do a series of webinars about infrastructure. So some good detailed information about what can and maybe should be done in various communities. We also have a webinar about the Ride of Silence, just kind of the history of that, and an intro to mountain biking, which is actually next Friday. So we hope to see some of the same folks on those calls. So for now, thanks everybody. Be safe. We'll see you out there.
Thanks so much, Dave. Really appreciate it. And thanks to everyone for joining us. Have a good day.
Take care, everybody.